Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, two blokes chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
All right, we are very pleased in talking about games people play. One game that we play down here a bit is footy, and then AFL Barwon are important in that. I would have thought, Robert, who
they
have
are
we got?
very, very important, and they have a commission, and the chairman of that commission is Craig Keating, and he's been very, very kind to join us this morning. Craig, welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
I was just talking to Josh Barnes from the Addy pre the break, and I asked him to think back 5 years ago when, well, I don't know, it might have been 5, 7, 8, when there was talk about cutting up the region, having 3, maybe 4 divisions and promotion and relegation, and some clubs were in serious trouble. What's been very pleasing from me is that outside of one club in each of the leagues, being North Shore, Port Arlington and Anarchy, who I would think would struggle to mount a case to say our future's bright and shiny, I reckon all the other clubs have done some seriously good work to get themselves back to relevance, not necessarily winning games, and I think Corio is a good example of not winning games, but as a club base and a plan for the future, they've got themselves back into a really good positive position.
Yeah, that's true, Rob, and all the clubs have evolved in recent times with there's some really good leadership at all the clubs. They're really looking at developing their club, and they're all, as we are, really keen on the sustainability model rather than the boom and bust mentality that might have been around at some clubs over the journey. So it's been really pleasing to see clubs evolve and become really effective managers of the club and looking forward and not just looking for tomorrow. So that's been part of it. I think the actual review and the work done around the sustainability of the clubs, and it was always about sustainability as much as equalisation, has boosted some clubs and made them think a little bit more deeply about how they run, and I think they're all doing a great job, as can be seen from the recovery from COVID.
And Craig, it's Neil Butler here as well, and thanks for joining us. The question that pops to my mind, as clubs, as you say, have evolved and so on, how important, clearly not a great thing for anybody, but how important was the COVID break to make clubs go, oh, hang on a minute, we've really got to give some thought as to how we organise ourselves?
Well, I think it scared the pants off all of us when it first happened, that how were we ever going to manage this with no income, and we made an early call to pull stumps on the season. We realised that there was little likelihood of a meaningful season, and clubs were concerned about volunteer health, about volunteers being able to be at the club safely, and generally about the sustainability of their club. But I think there's been a reduction in salary cap, which I think will be a really positive thing for clubs. It's been well accepted by clubs. Without COVID, I think you might have found that salary cap reduction across the board might not be quite as well accepted as it has been. And I'm really pleased to report that at the start of this season, every club was pretty much debt-free. So that's a fair different picture to what we might have seen 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, it has been an interesting turnaround. I guess one of the negatives that's come back out of it, though, is some players have had a year off and found other things to do, but they've been easily replaced.
Or their partners have.
The partners have. What has been an issue, though, is volunteers. And as I get around some clubs, I'm finding that people to fill those important roles of running the canteen and running the boundary or doing the scoreboard haven't been as easy to find as the routine of we go to the footy and we do this every year has been broken. That seems to be a major issue concerning, and not just the smaller, perhaps not successful on the ground clubs. I'm talking about clubs that are winning regularly but still struggle with their volunteer structure.
Yeah, that's a thing. It's across the whole state, and we're acutely aware of it. There's a lot of work being done trying to support the background work. COVID has actually provided a whole lot of challenges for clubs to be able to operate safely and within the environment as prescribed by the government. So there's more things for volunteers to do. So we see our role at AFL Barwon as our RAC team to assist clubs and develop processes that are manageable for volunteers to run. But it is a challenge, and I'm an optimist. I hope, Rob, that we see all the people that are back watching the footy will suddenly think, I can do something for this club. I'm really enjoying this environment. I'm really enjoying watching my local community club play football and netball. Maybe there's something I can do to make it a little bit better, or just respond when requested to assist by a club member. I think with the numbers of people attending the games, I do believe their volunteer base will bounce back. But you are right, people have found other things that they are interested in doing. We actually have changed a lot of things we do in terms of interacting with other people, and I think it's going to take some time to level out. But as I said, I'm optimistic that people will pick up the challenge and go with it and join their club and become, great volunteers for their club, where maybe now they're sort of just standing back a little bit.
I think the other thing too that we've spoken on this program and other programs, Rob and I, about the importance of football clubs and netball clubs to communities. In some respects, 50 years ago it was the church. These days it seems to be more likely the community football club. I'm talking mainly in regional places more so than metro areas. The thing that came through during the COVID period and the isolation, from a business perspective as well as other activities, was this feeling of isolation. It almost needs to get a reminder to people that belonging is a really important thing, rather than just turning up, but actually belonging. I reckon that anti-isolation thing would be a worthwhile direction to take.
100% agree with you, Neil. It's a thing that people have rightfully been really concerned about what's going to happen to their community clubs, and the leaders of those clubs have done, as I said before, a massive job. But now is the time for the community. Community needs to understand how good a job the clubs do and put their hand up to be involved. And you're right, they do. People do want to belong, and there's no better way to belong. There's not just to participate in a club as a spectator, but to actually get involved and take some ownership of what happens at your community club. And I think that can only be a win-win, a win for the community, a win for the club, and our Geelong communities are really well served with some magnificent volunteers, and I think those volunteers, the enjoyment you get out of being involved in a community club is you can't get it anywhere else. So I'd encourage everybody to get to it.
Craig, before we go into the junior football section, which I want to talk about because it's a little lopsided to say the least, on that same theme of volunteers, I've been for quite some time talking about in the cricket sense and football sense as well, the governing bodies are quite wealthy through television rights, and they talk about supporting grassroots. I'm not totally convinced that they do it well, but an area that definitely could be looked at is spending time and effort on recruiting future administrators, volunteers, giving them real purpose at the club. At this stage, there may be something happening in the AFL Barwon or AFL football system, but is there something in place, or could you see something in place to be encouraging our next age group of volunteers coming through?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Rob, and there is some work being done. AFL Victoria have undertaken a purpose review in terms of looking at what their role should be, and over the journey, it's sort of, since the VCFL morphed into an AFL Victoria, AFL Vic Country brand, I think there was a movement where the NAB Cup, being the under-18 TAC competition, or the NAB Cup as it's called now, and the VFL competition were under that auspices of AFL Victoria. I think AFL Victoria is changing its focus to becoming a more representative of community football, both metro and community, and there's been some extra money made available to the regions to assist with development, and we're just launching some new participation people in the region that are funded by AFL Victoria, where obviously the money comes from AFL originally. But yeah, there is a move in trying to make them more community-based. I think you'll see some changes over the next 6 to 12 months that will be more obvious to people, and the participation work they're doing has changed its focus to being letting the clubs develop their methods at clubland, but to get those kids through Auskick and the early stages of community footy, they're working really hard with an increased focus, if you like, on community football. So it's happening slowly, and I think the women's football growth is another area that they're looking at help assisting the grassroots, because I think they've realised that that part of the women's football's grown very quickly at the top end, but it's growing just as quickly at the bottom end and needs to grow even quicker, but has done that without virtually no support. And there will be some support in that area too. So we've got some extra funding in the regions for community footy from the AFL, and we're really advocating strongly that needs to be enhanced even further. And I think you'll find too that AFL Victoria have understanding that they need to be an advocate for community football more so than as much as they have to be an authority that runs the rules and assists with governance and operations. I think they understand they need to be stronger advocates for community footy.
I guess when they name their national second grade, the VFL, it gives you an insight as to how well they think outside of the capital city of Melbourne. But I said that through gritted teeth as a Brisbane Lions supporter. One thing that strikes me, though, Craig, is that when I was significantly younger than I am now, I undertook a level 1 coaching course and, in fact, ended up running that for the Oakleigh Chargers region. And you'd see a whole lot of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed mums and dads coming through, learning how to be a coach, albeit never going to coach AFL, but good interpretation of how to work with kids. Are there equivalent programs so that you can tap a young mum or a young dad on the shoulder and say, hey, listen, come and do this 3 nights program that introduces you to things like how to be the president of a club, how to be a treasurer of a club? Because invariably the person who's chosen as president or secretary is the one who didn't step back when everyone else stepped forward. I think it's, you know what I mean? It just, to me, it's a tap on the shoulder, hey, would you like to be president? It just seems to me there's an opportunity there to be more structured, which then can help people in their employment or other activities.
Yeah, there are some structures. The coaching piece, there are some really good resources around level, and everyone has to have a coaching accreditation to coach a club, so a team rather. So those are available. They can be done online now as well as face-to-face, and there are a number of those a year. Back 3 or 4 years ago, there was only probably 2 run, one in Ballarat, one in Geelong and one in Melbourne for the whole year. That's changed now where they can be done. We can run those here on demand almost at AFL Barwon. We also run some induction programs for presidents and secretaries and football managers. We've rolled that into a one-day event and some online resources this year and last year, and those resources are available. The thing now, at the moment though, the gap is probably the recruitment or identifying the person to target those programs too. So that's probably the gap in what we do, and we'll work really hard on that. But our RAC teams, they have all the skills and they have the time, are able to set aside time to go into clubs and work one-on-one. There was some state government funding during COVID to allow for clubs to get some assistance from an experienced football operations person or someone who's familiar with club constitutions and affiliation agreements, so that clubs could bring their Department of Justice requirements up to date and things like that. So look, there's work being done. It's probably something we don't sell well enough. The clubs, it's certainly canvassed amongst the clubs, but I agree with you that the resources are there. They could be polished a little, but the gap is more identifying or being able to identify the people to target those programs too.
Because I think the nice thing about if you became the president of Anarchy Football Club, for example, when your kids are going through, that's a skill set that you could end up then being on the board of the local community radio station or the local health authority. I just think there's some really transferable skills between that, call it community leadership rather than football club presidency, if you know what I mean.
Oh, look, I agree 100%. I'm a pharmacist in my day job, and I've been involved in football ops since before I was 30, in terms of being a president of a club and then a league and then doing what I'm doing now. So volunteering has been something that I've just grown up with, and my family did it, so I sort of followed suit. But you're right, the skills I learnt from football and what the knowledge I've acquired and the abilities to deal and to engage with people has served me very well in my professional career. So you are absolutely right. You can benefit from becoming a club leader, and those skills will serve you well in any field of endeavour. So I agree 100% with you.
Craig, the junior structure, we know that there's growth corridors that are overwhelmed with netballers and footballers coming into the system, Ocean Grove, Torquay, probably Lara to a degree, and the 2 major GFL clubs in the centre, which have school and probably even still church connections to lure young people into the club. It's causing a massive lopsided nature for the junior structure in Geelong. Has it got to the stage now where it's seriously on your radar to come up with some sort of balance? Because the structure of the points system underneath senior clubs' responsibilities, it's going to make it pretty tough for some and pretty easy for others. Yeah,
that's something that's definitely on the radar. We've this year we're treating 2021 as a participation year, so we've basically put a hold on a lot of the programs around the sorts of things you're speaking of. So, for example, we were looking to cap the number of sides at the lower age levels at the big clubs who've got 3, 4 and 5 teams in one age division, cap the number of teams to allow the neighbouring and other clubs nearby to be able to grow, and at the same time giving the kids somewhere to play all the way through. So what we're finding is that there might be 5 or 6 teams at a particular club at a low level under 13 age group, for example. By the time they get to 15, that club can't accommodate them all the way through, and we're finding gaps in those years. So our original plan was to try to cap the numbers at the bottom end so that new clubs could form, or players could move to a neighbouring club that's still convenient and still offers a good experience. That's all been put on hold, of course, because of COVID, where participation just needs to happen at the moment, so that's the focus. The grading of our competitions is designed to assist in that, but you are right, some clubs are growing really rapidly due to population centres. We've got some start-up clubs that need to grow into senior football clubs. I think the number of junior clubs here, and I've got the stats in front of me, I think there's something like 30 or 40% more teams than there were 20 or 30 years, or say 20 years ago, at junior and mid-junior levels, that sort of 13, 15 bracket. But at the same time, we've got the same number of senior clubs. So where do they go when they become 19? So we need, instead of growing these numbers of junior teams to large levels all under existing clubs, we need new clubs to evolve. And that's what the plan is for places like North Torquay with the Surf Coast Suns, Armstrong Creek, Mount Dunedin, Oakdean around Ocean Grove, and in the future, Lovely Banks and places like that. So there will be some growth in junior clubs, and some of them will morph into a senior club at some point in the future as the population continues to grow. But we also are mindful of making sure we spread the love, and that's not always that easy to do. So, running a draft or some sort of section where, once you get to 20 kids you can't recruit anymore, that's really difficult to manage in a community environment, because there's a whole host of reasons why a parent or family might want their kids to play at one club over another. But at the end of the day, we need to offer incentives. So 2021 is just focused on getting everyone back to play the game, and we've been really successful. The figures I got from my review with AFL Vic just yesterday was that our participation numbers are actually up on 2019, which is really encouraging in those junior levels. So that's a really encouraging sign for us.
Yeah, hopefully it's an important thing, because it's the club's thinking about what's best for them as opposed to what's best for the region. It'll be easy to see so many people lost to the game if they don't feel connected to a home that they want to be connected to. So it's a difficulty. There's a big conversation another day about the point system and how that's out. I had a chat to you off air during the week, and there's so much to unpack in that. And maybe later in the year we'll get you back and have a bit of a focus on that conversation as well.
That'd be a pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
Good on you, Craig. All the very best. Appreciate your time this morning.
Have a good day. Enjoy your footy, everybody.